The moment I saw that text, I knew something was up. Chris, some dude from her office. The message seemed harmless enough, but you don't get that twist in your gut over nothing. Sarah, always glued to her phone lately, was humming a different tune, and it wasn't for me. I'd ask about her day, and she'd just shrug, her mind obviously miles away. It wasn't like her, not the Sarah I married. I remember sitting across from her at breakfast, watching her smile at her phone. That smile used to be mine. Who's Chris? I asked casually, trying not to let my suspicion show. Oh, just a colleague. She brushed it off, but her voice had this high pitch it gets when she's not quite on the level. It started eating at me, you know? I'd lie awake, her texts pinging all night. She thought I didn't notice, but I did. I noticed everything. The way she'd light up when she typed, the quick screen switches when I walked past. Once, I caught a glimpse of her phone, messages pouring in from Chris. Can't wait to see you, one read. My heart sank. I had to confront her. I couldn't just sit there playing the clueless husband. So, one night, as she slipped into the shower, I asked straight up about Chris. Her reaction was a telltale sign. Defensive. A bit too quick to deny anything was going on. He's just a friend from work, John. You're being paranoid. But her eyes, they didn't match her words. The more she denied it, the more obsessed I became. I couldn't shake off the feeling that she was drifting away from me, getting sucked into this world where I didn't exist. Sarah, my Sarah, who used to find any excuse to spend time together, was now always busy, always tired, always preoccupied with her phone. I started to question everything. Our late night talks, our weekend plans, our simple moments of laughter, they all seemed to fade into the background. It was like living with a stranger who wore my wife's face. The woman I loved, who shared my dreams, my bed, was sharing parts of herself with someone else. And the worst part? I was losing her, bit by bit, text by text. The thought kept me up at night, this nagging suspicion that turned into a silent scream in my head. It wasn't just about the texts anymore. It was about us, what we were, what we'd become. I lay there, next to her, feeling miles apart, wondering if every "I love you" was just a placeholder for something, for someone else. That's how it all started. A simple text spiraling into a whirlpool of doubt and secrecy. And there I was, right in the middle, trying to hold on to the remnants of a marriage that was slipping through my fingers like sand. I had this nagging feeling, right? Something was off. Sarah, my wife, always had her phone with her, clutching it like some lifeline. At first, I tried to brush it off, but man, it was like a splinter in my brain. So, I started checking her phone. Yeah, I know, not the coolest move, but I had to know. Every time I grabbed her phone, it was clean. Too clean. It was like she was one step ahead, always erasing any trace of whatever it was. That's when I knew for sure something was up. She was up to something, and it wasn't good. Then one day, it hit me. She had this new app, looked like a regular calculator or something. But when I tried to use it, it asked for a password. Bingo. A secret app for messaging. Clever, Sarah. Really clever. But why? Why all the secrecy? I felt like I was in some sort of spy movie, except it was my life unraveling on screen. And Chris, this guy from her office, he was suddenly everywhere. Well, not physically, but in every whispered phone call, every time she laughed at her screen. I asked her about him once, and she just shrugged it off. But I could tell something was going on between them. I remember this one time. She said she was going out for lunch with her colleagues. But later, I found a receipt in her purse. Just for two, Sarah and Chris had their secret lunch, a cozy little rendezvous. The thought of it made my blood boil. She was slipping away from me, and all I could do was watch. At home, things were getting tense. I couldn't look at her without wondering what she was hiding. Every smile she gave me felt fake. I started to pull back, building this wall between us. I didn't want to, but the anger, the hurt, it was too much. And it got worse. They started meeting after work. Sarah, who used to rush home to spend time together, was now always working late. It was like a punch in the gut every time she said it. I knew she was with him, laughing, sharing moments that were supposed to be ours. I tried to confront her a few times, but she was a master at dodging questions. Always had an excuse, always ready to turn the tables on me. Why don't you trust me, John? She'd say. Trust? How could I? With every secret meeting, every hidden message, trust was the last thing I could offer. It was like living with a ghost. She was there, but not really. We shared a house, a bed, but we were worlds apart. And in her world, I was the outsider, desperately trying to claw my way back in. Every day, I watched her drift further away, into a life where I didn't exist. And every day, I lost a little more of the woman I loved. It was a slow, painful realization that I was fighting a battle I had already lost. That night, the suspicion was eating me alive. I had to know. So, I followed Sarah. Yeah, that's right, me, lurking in the shadows like some detective from a cheap novel. But what I saw, or rather what I almost saw, was enough to confirm my fears. There she was, sneaking around, looking over her shoulder. She was meeting him, Chris. I was just a shadow away from catching them red-handed. But she slipped away, just barely. It scared her, I could tell. The next few days, she was jumpy, like a cat on a hot tin roof. But she didn't stop. No, Sarah didn't stop seeing Chris. It was like she was addicted to whatever they had, and nothing, not even the risk of getting caught, could make her quit. So, I did something crazy. I planned a surprise weekend trip for us. A desperate attempt to rekindle whatever was left of our marriage. I took her to this cozy little cabin in the woods, the kind of place we used to love. It was beautiful, peaceful, the perfect setting to remind her of us. But the whole time, she was distant. It was like I was there with a stranger who looked like my wife. I tried everything: romantic dinners, long walks, talking late into the night. But she was miles away, lost in thoughts that clearly didn't include me. Every attempt I made to bridge the gap between us felt like it was just widening the chasm. And then we got back. Back to reality. Back to the mess. And it got messier. She found out that Chris, Mr. Perfect, was seeing someone else. I saw it in her eyes, the hurt, the betrayal. But it wasn't me she felt betrayed by. It was him. That stung more than I can say. In a way, I was glad she found out. I thought maybe this would be a wake-up call, a chance for us to start over. But things don't always work out the way you hope. She was hurt, yes, but not enough to turn back to me. Not enough to undo everything that had happened. I watched her struggle with it, torn between anger and longing. And all I could do was stand by, helpless, as she grappled with the reality of her affair. The woman I loved, caught in a web of lies and deceit she had spun herself, was now facing the consequences. And I, the bystander in my own marriage, could only watch as the drama unfolded. When suspicion creeps in, it festers like a bad wound. That's what happened to me. I couldn't shake off the feeling that Sarah was still seeing Chris, even after our weekend getaway. So, I started digging a bit deeper, checking her credit card bills. Call it a hunch, but something was definitely off. The bills were too clean, almost like she was covering her tracks. And I was right. Sarah had switched tactics. She was using cash now for her meetups with Chris. Smart move, but not smart enough. I knew her too well. Knew that her sudden need for cash wasn't for some innocent shopping sprees. The pieces were falling into place, and they weren't painting a pretty picture. Their affair, it was getting more daring, more reckless. I heard bits and pieces, caught whispers of their secret meetings. They were no longer content with just texts and lunch breaks. No, they were meeting in places that spelled danger in big, bold letters. It was like they were addicted to the thrill, the risk of getting caught. But what they didn't know was that I was onto them. I couldn't just sit back and watch my marriage crumble into dust. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired a private investigator. Yeah, it sounds extreme, but desperate times call for desperate measures. I gave the pie all the info he needed. Follow her, track her movements, find out what she's up to, I told him. It felt surreal, like I was a character in some gritty detective movie. But this was my life, and I needed answers. The investigator got to work, blending into the background, unseen, unnoticed. Sarah had no clue that her every move was being watched, documented. And me? I was waiting, bracing myself for the inevitable storm that was about to hit. Every day, the investigator would update me. Locations, times, sneaky rendezvous, the whole sordid affair laid bare. And every detail was like a knife, twisting deeper into my heart. The woman I loved, the woman I shared my life with, was living a double life. And the worst part? I was the outsider, the fool left in the dark, but not anymore. Now I had the upper hand. I had proof, cold, hard evidence of her betrayal. It was only a matter of time before I confronted her, before I brought the whole charade crashing down. And as I waited for that moment, a part of me mourned the loss of the life I thought we had, the future we were supposed to share. It was all slipping away, piece by painful piece, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The moment Sarah told me about her sudden work conference, I knew it was a lie. Call it intuition, or just knowing your partner too well, but I could tell she was up to something. And when Chris suggested a weekend getaway around the same time, the pieces clicked. It wasn't rocket science to figure out what was really going on. I felt a mix of anger and sadness, but I kept my cool. Have a good trip, I told her, my voice steady, hiding the storm inside. The minute she left, I called the private investigator. She's going on a trip this weekend. I want to know everything, I said. It was a point of no return. The investigator did his job well. He followed Sarah discreetly, capturing photos of her and Chris together. Every picture was a blow to my heart, a visual confirmation of her betrayal. It was happening, right in front of my eyes, yet miles away. Meanwhile, at the getaway, things were escalating between Sarah and Chris. I didn't need the investigator to tell me that. I knew Sarah. This wasn't just a fling for her anymore. She was in deep, maybe even considering leaving me for him. The thought alone was like a cold hand squeezing my heart, but nothing prepared me for when the investigator reported back with all the evidence. The photos, the details of their intimate moments, it was all laid out in front of me, undeniable and raw. Seeing Sarah with another man, talking about a future together, it tore me apart. I felt a mix of grief and rage, a sense of loss so profound it was suffocating. There she was, the woman I had vowed to spend my life with, planning a life with someone else. It was more than just an affair now. It was a betrayal of everything we had built together. I sat there, looking at those photos, and it felt like I was watching my marriage crumble into dust. It's one thing to suspect your spouse of cheating, quite another to have it confirmed with such brutal clarity. I was devastated, lost in a whirl of emotions I couldn't fully comprehend. How had it come to this? How had we gone from loving spouses to this twisted, painful mess? I had to face the truth, as bitter as it was. Sarah wasn't the person I thought I knew. She had changed, or maybe she had always been this way, and I just refused to see it. Either way, our marriage was on its last legs, and there was no going back from here. It was a defining moment, a crossroads. I knew I had to confront her, to bring everything out into the open, but part of me dreaded that confrontation. It wasn't just about exposing her lies, it was about admitting to myself that our marriage, our life together, was probably over, and that realization was the hardest pill to swallow. The day I confronted Sarah, it felt like I was walking through a nightmare. I had the photos, the reports, all the evidence of her affair right in my hands. We need to talk, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside. She looked at me, a flicker of fear in her eyes. I laid it all out, the photos, the investigator's findings. It was undeniable, yet she denied everything. It's not what it looks like, she said, but we both knew it was exactly what it looked like. Her words were like hollow echoes, bouncing off the walls of our once happy home. Meanwhile, Chris, the other guy in this mess, was losing his nerve. He wanted to lay low, avoid getting caught any further. Sarah told me about it later, how he was panicking, scared of the consequences. Funny, how brave people can be until they're facing the music. In the midst of this storm, I did something unexpected. I suggested renewing our vows. Maybe it was a desperate attempt to salvage what was left of our marriage, or maybe I just needed to know if there was anything worth saving. Sarah was taken aback, her guilt and conflict written all over her face. But her mind was elsewhere, with Chris. She had made up her mind to leave me for him. My wife, the woman I had shared my life with, was ready to walk away. It was a tough pill to swallow, knowing that I was fighting a losing battle. Before she could break the news to me, I planned a surprise vow renewal ceremony. I wanted to remind her of the love we once shared, of the promises we made to each other. It was a grand gesture, a last-ditch effort to win her back. The day of the ceremony, I watched her walk towards me, a mix of emotions on her face. There was love, yes, but also guilt, sadness, and a hint of resignation. We stood there, in front of our friends and family, about to renew vows that felt like they were hanging by a thread. It was a surreal moment, both of us caught in a web of lies and half-truths, trying to hold on to something that was slipping away. I wanted to believe that we could start over, that we could rebuild our relationship, but deep down, I knew it was a fantasy, a fleeting dream that was about to be shattered by the harsh light of reality. As we exchanged vows, I looked into Sarah's eyes, searching for a sign, any sign, that we could make it through this. But all I saw was a woman torn between two worlds, struggling to choose between the life she had and the life she wanted. And in that moment, I realized that no matter what I did, I might have already lost her. Standing there during the vow renewal ceremony, saying words that felt like ash in my mouth, I couldn't shake the feeling of being a complete fraud. Sarah's eyes, usually so full of life, were clouded with a mixture of guilt and detachment. It was like we were actors in a play, performing our roles for an audience that believed in a love story that no longer existed. After the ceremony, the facade crumbled. Sarah, with a voice that trembled despite her resolve, told me she wanted a divorce. It was a blow, sure, but not unexpected. The pain, though, was real and sharp, like a physical wound. It was the end of a chapter, the end of us. But the twists in this tale weren't over. After Sarah told Chris about the divorce, he began to distance himself. It struck me as odd. Wasn't this what he wanted? Or so I thought. Sarah was confused, hurt by his sudden coldness. It was like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. Then came the bombshell that turned everything on its head. Chris, the other man, was actually a private investigator. I had hired him to find out the truth about Sarah, but never in my wildest dreams did I imagine this outcome. It was a game of deception, and we were all pawns. When Sarah found out, her world fell apart. She had been played, her emotions manipulated in a game she didn't even know she was part of. The realization hit her hard. The man she thought she loved, the future she envisioned. It was all a carefully orchestrated lie. For me, it was a mix of vindication and sorrow. Yes, I had my answers, but at what cost? Our marriage, once built on love and trust, was now a pile of rubble, destroyed by lies and deceit. And in the midst of this wreckage was Sarah, a woman I once thought I knew, now a stranger, her world crumbling around her. It was a bitter victory, if it could be called a victory at all. The truth had come out, but it left destruction in its wake. As I watched Sarah grappling with the reality of her situation, I couldn't help but feel a pang of regret. Yes, she had betrayed me, but the web of lies I had woven was no less deceitful. In this twisted game, there were no winners, only broken hearts and shattered illusions. We were all casualties of a war we didn't know we were fighting. And as the dust settled, the only thing left was the cold, hard truth, lying bare and unadorned, a testament to the wreckage of what once was. The day I served Sarah the divorce papers, it felt like the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. I had all the evidence I needed, neatly compiled, a testament to the betrayal and lies. It was a hard thing to do, but it was necessary. There was no going back from here. The divorce process was messy, to say the least. It was a tangle of legal battles, emotional confrontations, and a constant reminder of the life we were tearing apart. Sarah was losing much in the process, our shared assets, the comfortable life we had built together. It was a steep price for her actions, and it pained me to see it, even though I knew it was the consequence of her choices. Then, Chris, the guy she thought she loved, the private investigator I had hired, vanished into thin air, and with him, a significant chunk of Sarah's savings. It was the ultimate betrayal for her, a cruel twist in an already painful saga. She was left reeling, not only emotionally but now financially as well. Alone, with her world crumbling around her, Sarah faced not just the financial ruin but also the public humiliation. Our once private life was now fodder for gossip, the details of our messy divorce spreading like wildfire. She had to bear the weight of judgmental stares, whispered rumors, and the harsh reality of her actions coming to light. At work, where she once held a position of respect, the rumors started to spread. Colleagues who used to greet her with smiles now offered her nothing but cold shoulders and pitiful glances. It was a harsh fall from grace, and I knew it was taking its toll on her. I watched from a distance, torn between anger and a residual sense of protectiveness. This was not the ending I had envisioned for us when we first set our vows. We were supposed to grow old together, not tear each other apart in a whirlwind of deceit and revenge. The sadness of it all was overwhelming. Here we were, two people who once promised to love and cherish each other, now embroiled in a bitter battle, leaving scars that would likely never heal. The love that once bound us together had been replaced by hurt and resentment, a painful reminder of what we had lost. As the divorce proceedings dragged on, it became clear that the life we had built was dissolving before our eyes. It was a sobering realization, one that came with its share of regrets and what-ifs. But the path we had chosen was irreversible, and all that was left was to move forward, each of us carrying the weight of our broken past. When the scandal hit, it was like a domino effect. First, I lost my job, the company I'd given years to, the career I had built from the ground up, gone in the blink of an eye. They said it was because of the scandal, the bad press. I knew it was more than that. It was the betrayal, the lies. It didn't matter that I was good at my job. All that mattered was the story. Then came the isolation. Friends who used to call every week, who I thought would stand by me through thick and thin, started distancing themselves. Invitations dried up, calls went unanswered. I was becoming an outcast, a pariah. The whispers and sideways glances were everywhere I went. It was a loneliness I had never known, a solitude imposed by the world. The divorce was a landslide defeat. John, my husband, got everything. The house, the car, most of our shared assets. I was left with nothing, a shell of the life we had built together. It was a harsh reality to face, sitting in a half-empty apartment, surrounded by the remnants of a life that no longer existed. In desperation, I tried to reach out to Chris, the man I thought I loved, the man who had been nothing but a pawn in a game I didn't even know I was playing. But he was gone, vanished without a trace. No answers, no closure, just a gaping void where he once was. It was a bitter pill to swallow, realizing that I had been nothing more than a mark in his investigation. And then, as if things couldn't get any worse, the legal troubles started. I was facing charges for fraud and deception, a consequence of the tangled web of lies that had enveloped my life. The court dates, the lawyers, the endless paperwork, it was overwhelming. Every step into that courtroom was a reminder of how far I had fallen, of the mistakes I had made. It was a downward spiral, a fall from grace that seemed to have no end. Each day brought a new challenge, a new reminder of the mess I had made of my life. The scandal had taken everything from me, my job, my friends, my marriage. And now, it threatened to take my freedom too. As I sat alone in that apartment, facing the consequences of my actions, I couldn't help but reflect on the choices I had made. The lies, the affair, the destruction of my marriage. It all seemed so senseless now. I was paying the price for my mistakes, a price that seemed too steep to bear. But there was no turning back. The past couldn't be undone. The damage couldn't be repaired. All I could do was face the future, however bleak it seemed. The journey ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges and hardships. But it was a journey I had to take, a path I had to walk, alone. Selling my stuff just to scrape by wasn't something I ever thought I'd have to do. There I was, a grown man, plucking my belongings like it was a yard sale. Each item sold felt like a piece of me was being chipped away. My guitar, the one I used to play for Sarah on lazy Sunday afternoons, gone. The watch my dad left me, gone. It was like erasing parts of my life, just to keep the lights on. Meanwhile, Sarah was sinking even deeper. She was living in this tiny, run-down apartment, a far cry from the comfortable life we once shared. I heard about it through the grapevine. Part of me felt sorry for her, but another part, the hurt part, thought it was just desserts. As for me, I was trying to move on. I started seeing someone new, a lovely woman who knew nothing of my past troubles. We were out there, just living life, unburdened by the shadows of my failed marriage. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting to know that Sarah was out there, alone and struggling. Then came the final twist, the one that knocked the wind out of me. I found out that Chris, the guy Sarah had an affair with, was in on it with me from the start. He was a private investigator I'd hired to catch her cheating. When Sarah found out, it was like the world dropped out from under her. It was a cruel revelation, one that made the whole sordid affair even more twisted. Sitting in my now sparsely furnished apartment, I couldn't shake off the guilt. Yes, Sarah had betrayed me, but the lengths I went to expose her, it didn't sit right. I had my revenge, but at what cost? There was no satisfaction, no sense of victory, just a hollow feeling where my heart used to be. I thought about Sarah, alone in her dingy apartment, her life in tatters. I wondered if she regretted everything, if she ever thought about what we had, what we could have had. As for me, I was left with a new life, but one that was built on the ruins of the old. Moving on wasn't just about finding someone new, it was about living with the choices I'd made, the actions I'd taken. The story of me and Sarah, it ended not with a bang, but with a whimper. Two people, once so in love, now just two separate tales of caution and regret. I sat there, in my near-empty living room, the silence a stark reminder of everything that had gone wrong. It was a dramatic end, sure, but not a happy one. Just a man, his memories, and the cold truth of his own making.